Welcome to the Phoenix Conversations. Second chances, fresh starts, and powerful new chapters. I'm Lucy Makara, author, publisher, and entrepreneur. And each week I talk to men and women who've lived through turning points and come out brighter on the other side. People who've rebuilt careers, relationships, their health, their hope, and their lives. So if you're standing on the edge of change or just need proof that it's never too late to start again, subscribe now to the Phoenix Conversations. Today I'm talking to Jude Jennison, the founder of Leaders by Nature, a leadership and team development company that empowers and upskills leadership teams to lead business growth and change. Jude's leadership experience includes 70 IBM, where she managed a budget of $1 billion and led UK, European and global teams. But her business now is very different to the leadership and team development training that Jude used to offer. Jude works with her herd of horses to transform nonverbal leadership and team behaviours, partnering with blue-chip companies and fast-growing entrepreneurial businesses. I'm really looking forward to finding out more about how horses led to Jude reinventing herself and how she now works with them to enable reinvention in other people. So, hello, Jude Jennison. Welcome to the Phoenix Conversations, and thank you very much for being here.
Hi, Lucy. Thanks for having me.
So, Jude, let's start at the beginning. Where did you grow up? What was life like for you? And what kind of view of the world did it produce for you?
I had a really happy childhood. I was born in Nottingham, and my parents were amazing. And I think I'm one of the lucky ones to have had both my parents staying together all my life. I lost my mum 18 months ago. I still have my 92-year-old dad, who is sprightly and eccentric, and you can't pin him down. And I think I always took more after my dad than my mum. So as a child, my sister was the sensible one, and she took after my mum, and I took after my dad and was more challenging, never really difficult or never really in lots of trouble, but always moving, always skipping. My dad had a cine camera, so the early videos of us in the 70s were me skipping up and down at weddings and my sister standing, behaving herself. And so there was a lot of movement, and we were really outdoorsy. So my parents met at a walking club, and they used to go into Derbyshire every weekend from Nottingham. And so that's where I learnt to grow up at the weekends.
It's really interesting considering where you are now, which we will get to, the movement, the outdoors, that all seems to be an interesting starting point and something you've kind of come back to. So did you go to college, university?
Yeah, so I did a French degree at Hull University, which is where I met my husband. And when I left there, the job market was terrible. And I managed to get myself a job in a bookshop, and I stayed there for 3 years and worked my way up to management. And then from there, I moved into IBM and developed my career there for 17 years before setting up my own business.
Wow, well, that's quite a long time to be in any one organisation. Did you kind of assume that would be your career for life when you got to IBM?
I think I always knew it wouldn't be, but I was enjoying myself and had great opportunities. I think one of the benefits of working in a large company is you can reinvent yourself every year. So I had 17 jobs in 17 years and 17 different managers. At the beginning, I was one of the first people to be recruited that didn't have maths or computer science as a degree. And so they didn't know what to do with me to start with, partly because I was one of about 5 women in an office of 1,500 men, and partly because I wasn't technical. And everything they gave me, I said, this is really dull. Can you give me something else? And then one day, one of the managers took me to see a client, and the client loved me because I was this fresh 23-year-old full of energy, not like the techies, different demographic and profile. And so I became one of the first service managers talking to customers and then going back to the techies and saying, this is what the customer wants. And what I realized I was doing was translating. So I was using my linguist skills. And what I then did was I spent developing teams and leading teams to do things that I couldn't do.
That's so interesting. I find that as somebody who's involved with AI myself at the moment, but absolutely not as the tech side of it, but as the sort of contributor of human knowledge and experience. And yes, I think that's such an important role. You talked about, kind of inventing yourself every year at IBM. Were there some sort of key inventions there where you actually actively thought, I need to be different, or I'm going to be different in this role?
I don't think so. I think I was always hungry for more. I think I always knew that I wanted something different. I always wanted to be having an impact. And I think deep down I knew that I needed to leave, but I never knew what to leave for. And I think pre the internet and the world that we live in today, it's so easy to be entrepreneurial. Whereas I think 30 years ago, it was quite hard to be entrepreneurial unless you had that support structure around you, which I didn't. So I think I stayed and I just kept getting bored. And then I would say to my manager, can I do something else? And then they would give me a more complicated account or more complicated customer, or they would say, there's a problem over here. Can you have a look at it? We don't know what we need doing and there's no team. So I would look at it, work out what needed doing, build the team. And then once that was done, I'd hand it over and then they give me something else. So usually I was being entrepreneurial within the business without realizing that's what I was doing.
I think they call that intrapreneurial. So team building was always your thing or became your thing as you developed through IBM?
Well, I think it was always my thing without realizing that's what I was doing. I thought I was solving, and I guess it's twofold, solving business problems by developing a team to solve the business problems that I couldn't solve. And I suppose that's been the theme throughout. And then a pivotal moment was when I went to a conference in Rome, which was an international women's conference. And I sat in a room with 500 women. And I'd never been in a room with so many women before. I'd only ever sat in conferences of men with half a dozen women. And that blew my mind to see that there were all these women from all over the world doing these incredible things. And I remember going back to my manager and saying, right, I want to shape the world and change the way the community live and work together. And he said, very nice, Jude, but what job do you want? And he, he was trying to be practical, but I think at that point I knew, no, enough's enough. And I'd been coaching for about 3 years at that point, and just coaching people in IBM just for fun because I enjoyed it. And so I took a year off and never went back. Took a year's sabbatical, and I thought I was going to set up a coaching business, but in reality, I was so burnt out that I took the year off. And at the end, I didn't go back. And that's when I set up my own business doing leadership and coaching.
So actually you took a year almost to reinvent yourself from a burned out corporate executive to deciding to start up your own business. And how much did you feel as you went through that year that you actually had to reinvent yourself to start the business? How much did you feel, you actually had to change in order to do that? And what did you need to become?
Well, what I needed to become was me. Instead of this kind of corporate form of a woman in business surrounded mostly by men, trying to work within a system that really didn't work for me, but actually I made it work for me by changing my behavior. And so what I realized was that I'd spent 17 years being a chameleon and becoming whoever anybody wanted me to be, so that I could fit within the system and thrive in the system, and was doing a really great job of that. But then when I took a year off, I actually did a year-long leadership program, which was designed to be a transformational program. And it was one of those where you kind of strip yourself back to a blank piece of paper and you get to rewrite, who am I in the world? What's my purpose in the world? Who am I in relationship? Who am I in systems, and how do I show up in systems, and how do I want to show up? So I just became more free, I think, to express myself, to wear what I wanted to wear, to say what I wanted to say. You know, I think there's still a little bit of that chameleon where you can put me, I always say, in any situation in the world and I will lead my way out of it. Partly because I now know who I am as a leader, but also partly because that legacy of being a chameleon means that I can fit anywhere and fit in and then find my own leadership within that and out of it. So I think that was a major transformation. Well, it was a major transformation for me. And I wouldn't be doing the work that I do today without having had that transformation. And what was interesting was before that, I always thought I was confident and self-confident, and that's how I showed up in the world. And then what I realized was that that was all based on a role that I was performing and my ability to deliver. And what I learned in that transformational year was to have self-confidence, even when I didn't know what I was doing or things were unsure or uncertain. And I think that's true confidence rather than role related confidence.
It's a really serious transformation, structured reinvention process that you went through then. So when you were on a sabbatical, did you take yourself off and find this program to do, or was it part of your IBM development?
No, it was a program that was run by the Coaches Training Institute that I'd done my coaching training with. And I remember when I did my first coaching course and I sat and I watched the leaders at the front of the room and I thought, there's something about you that you've got that I want and I don't know what it is. And it was self-confidence and presence and poise and an absolute trust in their own ability no matter what happens. And I couldn't articulate that then, but I can now, but very much a felt, embodied sense of being in the world that I wanted. And so this was a program that was a year long and it was a full week, 4 times a year with work to do in between. And it really stripped me back, laid bare, you know, sometimes very uncomfortable of like, who am I now and what is my purpose in the world? And I think those are quite fundamental questions that it's easy to answer what's my purpose when we've got a job and a structure around us because we can kind of join the dots. But when you've got a blank piece of paper and you say your purpose can be anything, that was really fascinating for me.
You make a really interesting point about what I would almost characterize as passive reinvention, where the chameleon-like thing comes. You kind of reinvent yourself to fit what other people want or a business wants or what's required of you at any particular time. An active reinvention where you decide what you want to be, who you want to be, and where you want to go next, which I hadn't really thought about before. And I think that's a very interesting point. So after this year of very active and almost quite painful reinvention of yourself, how did you set up your own business to reflect who you now were and what you wanted to do?
I think naively, if I'm honest, because going back 15 years, there weren't many people. I mean, everybody's leaving corporations now, but 15 years ago, not many people were leaving corporations to set up businesses. And so I was following people online and seeing what people were doing. And I just used the skills I got, which was coaching. And I think naively thought, well, I just set up a coaching business and off we go. And kind of that is what I did.
You got your clients and you started running a thriving business. But then you had a major change. We haven't mentioned the word horse before now. Horses, because that's how you work now. So that must have been changing from a straightforward coaching human beings, human to human business. How did you get to where you are now, working with horses and human beings?
The first coaching program that I ran was a leadership program with coaching in between, and it was with a group of IT directors. And I called the program Challenge the Status Quo, which again, years ago, that was pretty out there. I mean, now everybody uses that language. But at the time, everybody said, you can't use language like that. It's too dominant or it's too pushy or, you know, we don't want to challenge the status quo. And I said, well, if we want to lead in a different way, we need to challenge the status quo. And so I sold that program, and it was the first program I sold to a group of IT directors. And it was about them being more bold and courageous in their leadership. And it was 1 day a month for 6 months with coaching. And I think round about workshop number 3, I asked them as their homework to go and overcome their fear of something. And the reason for that was that what I realized with fear is a normal emotion that we all experience. And we experience it at times of change or when we're not sure. And what tends to happen is we either fight the fear and we push through it, like public speaking for a lot of people who are frightened. They'll stand up, do a talk and get off as quickly as possible, but they're still scared. Or they avoid it and they won't put themselves in situations where they're scared. So we have this fight and flight experience of fear. And because I like to walk my talk, I thought, well, if I'm asking them to overcome their fear of something so that we can then discuss what is it like to sit in the fear and lead through it, I need to do the same. So I thought, well, I'm frightened of horses, so I'll just go and overcome my fear of horses. So I Googled horses and coaching and found somebody, rang him up and said, I know you normally work with corporations, but can you help? And he said yes. And I went and spent 2 hours with him. And within 5 minutes, I reframed my fear to respect. Because what I realized was that where this 600-kilogram horse was trying to get close to me and I didn't know how to manage my boundary with it. And so I was getting scared because I felt like I was being pushed around by a 600-kilogram horse. And what the chap said was, well, what happens if you manage your space and you ask the horse just to step out of your space? And so I just said, stop there, and put my hand out, and the horse stopped. And what I learned in that first 5 minutes was, how do I stay in relationship with someone or something that I find intimidating, whether that's a horse or a person banging their fist on the table saying, get out of my effing country, which I once had. Again, we fight or flight with fear. And what I learned was that we can actually stay in relationships when we're scared, which is what happens when we have different opinions. We often get scared because we feel threatened and we fight or flight in conflict. And what I learned was, if I respect your opinion and I respect mine, even when they're completely different, we can stay and have a conversation about that. And that doesn't mean we have to ever agree, but we can at least meet each other as sentient being to sentient being. And that's what I learned in 5 minutes with the horse, which 17 years in IBM had not taught me the embodied experience of feeling really calm in a place of conflict and fear, and to actually lead confidently and calmly through it. And that blew me away because that was 5 minutes. And so I went back and I trained in this work with no intention of doing it because I didn't know anything about horses, but there are training programs around equine assisted learning and leadership. And so I trained in that and clients just came. So I did what any sensible person does. I bought a horse and sent an email out to my list, which was 100 friends and family at the time, and said, I'm going to run a workshop with my horse. If anybody wants to come, it's 2 for the price of 1. And 10 people or 20 people booked on.
Oh, how amazing.
And so I just started working with horses.
Did you run that first workshop just as something sort of outside your business, or were you already thinking this is something I could run a business around?
I was just seeing the results were so powerful and so profound and so fast that it would take me 6 months to get to that level of capability, to go from not being able to manage conflict to being able to manage with it such gravitas and presence and confidence and clarity and relationship skills. That's months in the making, and yet I learned that in 5 minutes. And so I knew that I wanted to do this work, I just didn't know how. And so what actually happened was I sent the email out first inviting people to book on and pay. And then once I got 10 people booked and paid in about 2 weeks, that was when I thought, well, now I have to get a horse and deliver it. So I delivered it in pairs. So because it was two for the price of one, people brought their friends. So I did two people at a time with one horse. And then after about 6 months, I mean, we had so many dramas, I can't tell you, because I knew nothing about horses. And so I was learning, how do you look after a horse? How do you pick a horse's feet out? How do you keep a horse calm? I didn't just have an easy horse, I had a snorting beast on the end of a lead rope. And so I had to really learn how to stay calm at a whole other level, to bring her energy down and get her to feel safe around me, knowing that I knew nothing about what I was doing. I barely knew one end of a horse from the other. And yet I was seeing she was doing extraordinary work with clients. And at the 6 month point, I'd had so many dramas that I was on the verge of giving up. And everyone around me was saying, this is madness, give it up. And so I bought a second horse and then decided, if I'm going to do this, I need to do it with teams and really take this serious. And so I bought my second horse and started working with teams.
So at that point, you reinvented your business from human to human horse human, and that was it. But I feel that as well as reinventing your business here, was also a very personal reinvention. You seem to have been absolutely committed to the idea of working with horses, even though, I mean, it's almost extraordinary, even though you knew nothing about them in a sense, you didn't know how to look after them, you had no experience with horses, and yet you felt compelled to do it.
I think because the results were so rapid, because what I haven't explained is horses respond based on our nonverbal communication. So everything we're rumbling internally, the horses are responding based on that. And they want the same things from us as human beings as they want from each other, which is, are we clear what we're asking them to do? Is there a strong relationship based on trust and respect? And is there free will to choose if and how they engage? And those are things that horses want from us, but those are also things that humans want from each other too. So there was a real parallel there, even though as a species we're completely different. You would think what our needs are at our core is, does it feel safe to be with you as a leader? Whether you're a horse or a human, or whether I'm a horse or a human, what we all want is to feel safe in our working environment. And so I just realized that a 600 kilogram horse takes people out of their comfort zone. So right from the beginning, I was talking about uncertainty, because I never knew whether my first horse was going to come with me or not. So everything was uncertain for me. Didn't know how to run a business, didn't know how to look after a horse, didn't know how to do the marketing. I didn't know anything. I was making it up as I went along. And what I realized is that that's what uncertainty requires of us. It requires us to lead with clarity and confidence, even when we have no clue what we're doing or where we're going. And so right at the beginning, I was started to talk about uncertainty and everybody shut it down. So the book that I wrote called Leading Through Uncertainty started in my first week by owning a horse. It was some 5 or 6 years later before I wrote it and published it, before the market was ready for it.
Did writing a book have an element of reinvention for you as well? Was that the time when you published the book? Was that the time when you felt, okay, I am now an expert in this unusual area. I have something to say that is worth hearing?
Yes, I wanted to share my own experience, but I went through this whole turmoil of, I'm not a famous person. Who am I to write a biography or, share my story or what I know? And also, I don't know anything about horses, so who am I? So I went through that whole turmoil. And in fact, I self-published because I didn't have the confidence or belief that anybody would be interested in what I'd got to say. So I self-published so that I could give my book away to clients. And then it was only when I wrote my second book, Leading Through Uncertainty, that I started to invent myself as actually, I am an author now. I've written 2 books, which means I can write, and I had a publisher for my second book and then my third book. And then, as you know, Lucy, I'm dabbling with creative writing. So I'm trying and to write my first fiction book as well. So I'm now reinventing myself as a writer, not just as a non-fiction author. So I think these reinventions come as we stretch into who we're becoming in our lives. And I think that the one thing that I've always done is stepped out of my comfort zone, which means that I can reinvent myself. And I almost don't see it as a reinvention anymore. It's more of an evolution of, well, of course I became an author because I had so much to say. And then from that became a speaker because I'd written so much and needed to share the messages. And so these things just evolve.
So, Jude, I really want to ask you, I mean, I can imagine, I know what a training day with people, with a team, or with coaching might look like. Tell us what a day of a team of humans coming to you to work with you now have a herd of horses. What happens on these days, and how do you get other people to start their own reinventions by working with your horses?
So every day, I've done this work now for 15 years, and every day is different. And I design a day based on the business outcomes that a company is looking for and the learning outcomes they're looking for. And then somehow I bring that with the horses and it gets created because people bring their energy and their stuff in the same way as I did in my experience. The first thing that we do is we observe the horses. So the horses are in a field and we stand the other side of the fence because it's actually really uncomfortable for people to step into a field of 5 horses. And what that does is it gives people a chance to observe. So the first thing they learn is slowing down, learning to breathe. They start to feel, because most of the time we shut our emotions down in the workplace. But all of a sudden, when we slow down, we allow ourselves space to feel. And I ask people to name how they feel, and they will say anything from bored because the horses aren't doing anything to terrified and in tears because it's such a big stretch to excited to can we just crack on and get in the field? And there's a whole range of emotions that happens to the same experience. And what that does is it gets people to recognize that our emotions inform what we do next and how we do things. But also within a team, our emotions, our responses are different all of the time. And so just because I'm excited about a project doesn't mean everybody else is. And so we start right from the beginning, start to think about how emotions influence behaviors and our interactions and become much more mindful of that. And then typically we'll get people to lead a horse. And that might sound really straightforward, but the way that I handle my horses, everything is through free will. So they don't have to do anything they don't want to do. And that is on an everyday basis as well as with clients. So if a horse doesn't want to come through a gate, I'll take them through a different gate, or I won't bring them in. So everything I'm doing is in relationship with and to the horse. And so my horses won't do anything they don't want to do. So they require people to bring clarity, relationship, and free will. And when we bring all of that and we are at our best in our leadership, they'll engage willingly. And when we don't, then it's a chance for that person to explore, what am I rumbling internally that's getting in the way of the relationship or stopping me from being clear about what I'm asking?
So can you give me a couple of examples of things that have happened to people on the day that they've come for training, sort of extraordinary revelations?
So the first thing that happens is the horses respond the minute the people arrive on site. So sometimes the horses will lie down if we've got a team who are utterly exhausted. I've had that happen. I've had horses galloping round for 15 minutes because the team is so stressed and so boisterous and so high on energy that actually they're intimidating and they don't realize it. All the horses will be really calm and will come up and be really gentle and build relationships. But if that team is too nice, which, if they're too nice or too collaborative, then the horses won't do what they ask them to do. So right from the beginning, they learn what's the culture, and I learn what's the culture in this team. One person arrived who was vibrating with stress, a very senior leader, was adamant that she wasn't stressed and that she was calm. And she walked into the field and they all did a flat out gallop towards her and went round us and took off. And I looked at her and I said, "How are you doing?" And she said, I've realized I'm like a wall of energy at everything I do." And then all of a sudden we're having a different conversation around her stress level is meaning that she's approaching everything full on, high pressure, 300 miles an hour, but without realizing the impact she was having. Now, again, I could have coached her for 6 months, but if she's adamant at the end of 6 months that she's still not stressed, there's nowhere I can go with that. But when the horses demonstrate what's actually going on for you, then there's nowhere to hide and we have a different conversation. The person who is a people pleaser will spend ages stroking the horse, building a relationship, and then will turn to me and say, why aren't they moving? And I'll say, "Where are you going?" And they'll say, "Oh, I don't know. I was waiting for the horse." And the horse is waiting for them. And then the opposite of that is the person who's very task focused, who marches off and says, "Right, we're going." And of course, the horse just suddenly says, "Hang on a minute, say hello first." So, we get these extremes and this whole balance in between of like really fine tuning. Where are you brilliant as a leader and where are you sabotaging the impact that you want to have? And that's where we start to play with the horses.
Be such an extraordinary experience, especially for people who have not had any experience with horses or who are scared of horses, just to have their own personality in a way exposed and embodied by the horse's response. So not everybody is I mean, I would love to come and work with you on a day like this, and maybe one day we'll be able to. But for somebody who isn't going to perhaps be able to come and work with you or have any contact with horses, what would your advice be if they are coming up to change, if someone's, knows that a reinvention is approaching, whether something they choose to do or something that life has thrust upon them? What would be your quick advice to them?
So I'm currently doing another reinvention in that I'm developing a tech product called Ascopus, which is a leadership app to help people navigate change and build relationships and lead confidently in the world and in work. So that's coming. That's a new reinvention. But I think the key thing for people is just do it, stretch out of your comfort zone, build a support network around you so that when you fall, that you don't fall too far. But actually, it's in the falling sometimes that we reinvent ourselves. And I think just trust in life, trust in wherever you're going, something magical will appear. Because what I know about life is even when we're at our depths, or we think we're at our depth, something magical appears that we never expected. So I think trust in life and trust in taking the next step and see where it takes you and then take the next. You don't need to have everything mapped out. We can't map our lives out completely. Life is an exploration.
Jude Jennison, thank you so much for this incredibly insightful conversation.
Thank you, Lucy.
Jude, I really enjoyed that conversation. It was fascinating to discover how, without ever being a horsey person, you were led from a real fear of those magnificent animals to becoming an expert in their body language and behaviour, and to close communication with them to reveal and build the power of leadership in other humans. Truly an unexpected reinvention. So if you're standing on the edge of change or just need proof that nothing is impossible and it's never too late to start again, listen to Jude's story and excellent advice, and subscribe now to the Phoenix Conversations on Spotify, Apple or YouTube, or maybe all three. You can connect with me on LinkedIn, Instagram, TikTok and Facebook. Due to my unspellable and unpronounceable name, I am the only Lucy Macara on the internet, and I'd love to hear your reinvention story. I look forward to seeing you on the next episode.